How's it going, guys? Lone Hawk here today, and welcome to a guide on how to make the perfect crosshair in Overwatch for you. No crosshair is going to fit everyone, so in today's video, we're going to be giving you some tips and tricks to making the perfect crosshair that will be comfortable for you. So here's the thing with crosshairs. I mentioned it before, no crosshair will fit everyone. In the end, what's most comfortable for you is going to be the best. And that's actually what we're here to help you find, what's most comfortable for you. Let's start by talking about crosshair type. We're going to split it up into 3 groups. There's like 5 options, but we're going to use 3 groups. One is the default option that every hero comes with. The second group is just the dot, and the third group is everything else in between. For heroes with weird mechanics, the default crosshair is often what people go with. People like Hanzo, Zarya. A lot of these heroes, a lot of people like to use the default crosshair on these heroes. However, that crosshair can be somewhat just over encumbering, I guess. It's just too much on your screen. Zarya's, for example, I don't personally like. It gives you like this little resource bar as well as the number on the side that shows how charged you are. But if you can read, that's not even necessary. So switching to something like the dot might be more preferred because there's less on your screen, something you might not have considered. Hanzo, on the other hand, I love. The 2 bottom horizontal lines I never use, but the dot and the first horizontal line directly below it, I use the distance between those all the time to determine the range of my shots, and it works very well. So that's one that I would say maybe keep unless you don't use those ever and you just know the ranges. For the other heroes in the game though, the ones that shoot, guns, Soldier 76, McCree, Sombra, Tracer, I recommend not using the default crosshairs. They're just not that great. There's definitely something you can find more in the settings that you'll like better. Let's talk about those. The first one we're talking about is the dot, because the dot is very different from all the other crosshairs, and it's simply because it's all that's on your screen. People like the dot because it's exactly in the middle of the screen. You don't have a crosshair, you don't have a circle, you don't have to guess where the middle of your screen is. It's right there. This can be good and bad. It's great at close ranges because you know where the middle of your screen is and nothing bad's gonna come of it. You're someone like Tracer, you just shove your guns into people and that dot is gonna do its job just fine. But at longer ranges, the dot can be pretty bad. Someone like McCree or Widowmaker or other heroes like this can suffer from using the dot because it can actually hinder your vision. You can't actually see the head of the person you're shooting if there's a dot over it. So you're going to have to make the dot very small or opaque if you really want that to benefit you. I recommend, though, at longer ranges, just switching to one of the other crosshair options. We'll talk about those in a minute. The dot, though, is ideal for heroes that are at close range, that don't have to aim, maybe. People like Mei. Mei's left click, the dot is perfect for. Winston, the dot is perfect. Genji, Tracer, Zarya, if you don't like her default crosshair, these are all heroes the dot works perfectly on. Other heroes though that are longer, medium range maybe, I recommend using one of the other 3 groups. Let's talk about those. In this group, you have crosshairs, you have circles, and then you have the infamous crosshair and circles. Right off the bat, I'm gonna say you're super weird if you use crosshairs and circles. It's just so much clutter on your screen. It is way more trouble than it's worth. You could probably perform better with circles or crosshairs, whichever you like better, than you can with crosshair and circle. It may take a while to get used to, but I encourage you making the switch. Let's talk about the settings in these groups. The first one being bloom. Bloom is something that is largely personal preference, but there is some pros and cons to using it. Bloom is great on heroes that have recoil because it lets you know how much recoil you're experiencing and when your gun is fully accurate. Sombra, Soldier 76, these are 2 examples of heroes with weapons that have bloom. But the problem with bloom is, as your bloom spreads out, you can no longer see exactly where the center of your screen is, and it might just be distracting, it might not be something you like. Furthermore, if you look at heroes like Sombra, there's no real need for bloom. Bloom is helpful for burst firing. It lets you know when your shots are going to be accurate and when they're not going to be accurate. So some people that play Soldier 76 like to use this to burst burst fire at longer ranges. Some people don't just because they think it's ugly. But heroes like Sombra, they don't really have a need for it. Sombra's not a burst fire hero. You pretty much always spray and pray and you just let the bullets fly everywhere on your screen. So there's no real need to have bloom there because you know what the bloom would look like. You understand Sombra. There's no visual representation that needs to be made. You're still going to put the crosshair in the middle of the screen, so you might as well use something like Dot or something without bloom, unless you just really like the way bloom looks. Some people like having bloom, but they also want to know exactly where the center of the screen is, and that's when you put a dot in the middle of your crosshairs or the middle of your circle. Now here's something I'm going to say right off the bat. If you're going to use the dot in the middle of your crosshairs or the middle of your circle, you don't need the circle and the crosshair if you're not using bloom. There's no reason for the dot and the crosshair if you're not using bloom. Why, you may ask? Well, if the dot is in the middle of your screen, what are the crosshairs doing? The crosshairs aren't moving because you have bloom turned off. There's no need for them. They're literally just obstructing vision. So unless you're running bloom, there's no need to have crosshairs and the dot. That's my 2 cents on that issue. Now let's talk about if you are running bloom. If you're running bloom, it can be useful to have the dot in the middle. For heroes like Sombra, like I said, if you just like the way bloom looks, but you still want to know where the center of your screen is, perfect. You just put the dot there. Same with Tracer, although both of those heroes are heroes I'd recommend running dot on. Trust me, the dot is so clean on close range heroes like that. Soldier 76 is a big one though. If you want to know where your spread is, you can run the crosshairs as well as the dot, because the dot will always direct you to the center of your screen and the crosshairs will tell you how accurate you are. And that can be a good combination, a good trade-off between visibility and information provided by the crosshair. As far as opacity goes, I actually recommend keeping opacity almost to 100%, so fully visible, because as soon as you start getting lower amounts of opacity, the sooner your crosshair is going to blend in with backgrounds and the harder it is to see. Sure, you're going to have a little bit of vision more than you did before, but it's already going to be hard to see through the crosshair, so you might as well just have it as bright as possible. I recommend having it almost fully visible unless you strongly feel otherwise. Finally, we have width, length, and the center gap. Width and length are totally going to be personal preference. I just like having thin, somewhat medium length crosshairs. Some people like fat, short ones. It's really up to you. But the center width is something we need to talk about. If your center width is 0, you should probably be running the dot. There's no reason to have the reticles extend outwards of your screen and just obstruct more vision if they're touching each other. So you should probably consider just moving to the dot all around, unless you're obviously using bloom. If your center width is huge and there's like no point in having your crosshair in the middle of your screen, you should probably consider running the circle. The circle provides a nice trade-off of visibility because you can see the middle of your screen, but also shows you where the middle of your screen is pretty well if you like that. The final part of this video is going to be about crosshair colors. And I have to say, for the love of all that is holy, do not run black. Do not run dark purple. Do not run these colors that do not stand out against the background. I don't care if you say it till you're blue in the face. I perform better with a dark colored crosshair. It's just a mental block. The crosshair should stand out from what's behind it. Colors like bright colors, yellow, blue, and green are great because they contrast the enemy's red outline that appears on the actual player model. Colors like red are okay because they're bright, but they also blend in with the other player models, so it can be a little confusing, so you have to keep that in mind. It's not entirely unheard of to switch your crosshair color based on the map. This is something I never see people do, and it's something that you'd be surprised with. Sometimes, if you ever find yourself in a team fight, and you're just like, I can't see anything, I don't know what's going on, it's because your eyes have most likely lost track of your crosshair. You can see all the enemies just fine, but there's so much clutter, so much chaos, that your crosshair is lost in the mess. Maps like Route 66 are very red, so if you're running a red or an orange crosshair, switch it to something like blue or lime green. Lime green is one that almost always works. If you're on a map like Volskaya Industries, sometimes the blue can blend in with the blue hue of the map. Switching to something like red, or once again lime green or yellow, could be beneficial to you as well. Do not be afraid of switching colors based on the situation. Trust me, it's more useful than you'd think it is. Anyway, hopefully you all enjoyed this video. If you did, be sure to check out yesterday's video where we talk about some very cool changes to the practice range that Blizzard could implement with ease. That would make it 10 times better. Anyway, I'll see you guys all later. Have a good one. Lone Hawk out.